So, hello and welcome to today's event with the Authors Guild Foundation. We're going to be talking about author mentorships, which is something that's come up in discussions we've had with our business boot camps for writers partner organizations, or other writing orgs like the Asian American Writers Workshop, Blue Stoop in Philadelphia, and Las Musas, which we'll be hearing more about with our people on the panel today. Thanks to our audience for being here and for your pre-submitted questions. Helps us know what you want to hear about, but we've got the Q&A box on Zoom where you can type in any other questions, and we'll get to those as time allows toward the end of the hour. Also, thank you to the National Endowment for the Arts. With support from them and our donors, we're able to put out educational programming like this for writers, just free and open to the public. Much appreciated. Our speakers today are going to be Crystal Hana Kim. She's the author of the novels The Stone Home, last year, a finalist for the Maya Angelou Book Prize and longlisted for the Joyce Carol Oates Award, and If You Leave Me, which was named a best book of 2018 by over a dozen publications. M. Garcia Pena, or Mia Garcia, is the author of Even If the Sky Falls and The Resolutions. She was a contributor to the YA monster anthology Our Shadows Have Claws, and she's the author of the picture book When We Find Her, forthcoming from Viking Books for Young Readers. She's a founding member of the artist collective Las Musas Books, and she splits her time between Puerto Rico and New York. And our moderator today is Julian Schendelman, writer, editor, and organizer based in Philadelphia. He's a co-director of the literary arts organization Blue Stoop. He's published plenty of poetry and other writing, and I believe he's working on his first novel. With that, I'll go ahead and I'll turn my camera off. I'll watch the Q&A to help with that. But Julian, let's get it started. Thanks so much. Have a fun chat.
Well, thank you so much, Johnny, and to the Authors Guild for having us. I'm really excited for this conversation with Crystal and Mia. I'll just say a couple words about myself and my work, and then I'll have Crystal and Mia introduce themselves briefly, just to talk, in a couple sentences, like why are we here today? How does mentorship appear in your life generally? So I'm Julian. Like I said, I am a co-director of Blue Stoop, which is a literary arts organization serving the greater Philadelphia area, which means I also live in the greater Philadelphia area. I write fiction, as previously mentioned, and my sort of, I guess, relevance to this topic is that Blue Stoop offered its very first mentorship program this last year in collaboration with Jennifer Weiner. So I'll say more about that later, but let's hear from Crystal first, if you don't mind. In a couple words, who are you? How are you here today?
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming to this chat. My name is Crystal, and I will be talking about mentorship and the roles of organized mentorship and I think like unstructured mentorship. So I've been a mentor with the Asian American Writers Workshop once and the Pen America Emerging Writers Fellowship twice. And then also I do a lot of kind of just like organic mentorship of former students that is unpaid and is just kind of unstructured, I guess, but I do a lot of that as well. So I'm happy to talk about both. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks. And Mia, how about you?
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Julian. I am Mia Garcia. I am a mentor and also run the mentorship program of Las Musas Books, which is a Latinx women and non-binary gender non-conforming essentially marketing group that was created to support fellow Latinx authors and illustrators in the book world. So I've been mentoring with them for 5 years and also can offer some insights as I've also been planning those mentorship years as well and organizing them through the organization.
I'll give a quick overview of what this conversation will look like, and then we'll get into some more specifics. So we're going to talk about each of our panelists' experiences around mentorship in more detail, kind of just do an overview of what a mentor-mentee relationship could look like and how to make the most of it, and some alternatives to formal mentorship. And then we'll close with a short, probably pretty short Q&A. So to start us off, I'd love to hear about each of your individual experiences with mentorship, either as a mentor or as a mentee. Just to speak for myself, I've participated in like a publishing type of mentorship about like finding jobs in the publishing industry. That was a pilot program from Blue Stoop well before I worked for Blue Stoop. And again, I mentioned that Jennifer Weiner Fellowship, which was for woman-identified emerging writers, and provided a lot of support, both like career support, editorial kind of editing support, and of course, financial support was a part of it as well. So again, the question was, tell me about your experience as a mentor or a mentee. Crystal, I know that you have worked with Asian American Writers Workshop with Pen Emerging
Mhm.
Voices. I'd love to hear more about those or anything else you want to mention.
Yeah, so the Asian American Writers Workshop is for those who identify as Asian American. And what I like about it is its structure, right? So we like I sign a contract as a mentor, and I receive a small honorarium, and I promise to meet with my mentee for at least 4 times over the course of 8 to 10 months and read 60 pages of work, and we build a relationship. And so within that structure, then I know what the expectations are on both ends, right? And the onus of whether or not to provide feedback on this, the 60 pages or just to read it or do line notes, that's on the mentor. But I always do provide line notes, and then we have meetings. And if the mentee lives in New York, I'm happy to meet with them in person. Pen America is also similar, where you agree to meet with the mentee 5 times over the course of 5 months. And I agree to read 75 pages of prose, or if you're a poet, it's 25 pages of poetry. And you also agree to write a brief intro to their kind of collective end of the semester reading. And what I like about those is that there's a structure, right? So we, again, clear expectations. The Pen America Emerging Voices Fellowship really emphasizes BIPOC, LGBTQ plus, immigrants, disabled writers, and those living outside of urban centers. So I think that is a really great focus of the program as well. And then again, I guess we'll talk about that later, but I also do kind of more organic mentorships as well. Is that a good overview for now, Julian?
I think that'll do it.
Okay.
Mia, tell us about Las Musas or any other mentorship things in your life, past or
Sure,
present.
of course. So Las Musas, the mentorship program started in 2019 and came from the need to address that. I don't know if y'all are familiar with the CCBC numbers, which is Society of Children's Book Publishing, which every year has puts out the percentages of how many books are created by people of color, right? And at the time, I think the number of books created by Latinx authors or illustrators was around 5 to 6%. It's currently at 9%. And if you compare that to, I should note that this is a mentorship for kidlit writers. So everything I'm saying is within the content of children's publishing. And if you compare that to the 26 to 27% of children in schools who are Hispanic or Latino, Latinx, it's a very big difference. So part of the mentorship came from us as authors and illustrators asking ourselves, how can we bridge that gap? How can we share the information that we had at the time, as little as it was, right? Because we were all newbie writers, and that's how the mentorship started. So Las Musas mentorship is a 6-month mentorship. It starts April to September of each year. Both mentors and applicants submit a set of answer a set of questions. We have a long application form that includes a sample of your work if you are looking to become a mentee. And for our mentors, we ask them essentially what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are as well, because not everybody, a lot of authors who have been in the game for a very long time know nothing about querying, like don't remember what it is to write a query letter, don't remember what it is to like be in the trenches of agenting and all that stuff. So part of the matching process for us, if we do pick a mentee, is to make sure that their mentorship is as fruitful as possible, and matched to a mentor that is there for their goals and is able to help them achieve their goals within those 6 months as well.
Interesting. So one of the interesting parallels here is that both of you are working with mentorship organizations that really are trying to amplify and uplift populations that maybe are typically excluded from these industries. So I'm curious, like in either of your experiences, and either or both of you can respond to this, are you seeing results? And what I mean by that is not like, a number increase necessarily, but like a qualitative change in the people you're working with. Like how Are you seeing their perceptions of themselves as writers evolve? Are you seeing mentees go on to do cool things? Like, what are the outcomes that you're seeing?
Should I go first, Mia? Oh, you go first, Mia.
Oh, okay. Um, yes, I mean, the one of the benefits of also being running this program is that I do get to see a lot of the behind the scenes nitty gritty. As part of the mentorship, we also encourage community with our mentees. I don't know, Crystal, if you find that a lot of your mentees lack that connection to fellow writers and illustrators. So one of our
Yeah.
big goals for the mentorship is for them to connect with each other and to understand that they are not alone in this process.
Mhm.
I think that's one of the big things that we see every year is just these communities growing and then supporting each other. And then also on the basic quantitative, we do hear when they get an agent. We do hear when they get representation and they get their books out. And then they themselves then join the Musas published
Mm.
community as well. So it all sort of is a bit circular, but also very natural. So we are kind of a community that is trying to be as supportive as possible and celebrate each other's successes because in publishing, no one's going to do that for you, particularly if you're part of a BIPOC community.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think both, I don't work for AWW or Pen America, but so I don't know the inner workings or have stats, but I do think that I know Pen America, part of their fellowship also includes cohort workshops, so there is like this element of community building. Uh, and I do think that those who seek mentorships like these structured programs are oftentimes looking for that community that they might not have in wherever they are living. And I think that just from an anecdotal perspective, I find myself mentoring people of color, right? People from marginalized communities. And I think anecdotally, I do see more excitement, more hope, more determination. And, there's a long way to go in the publishing industry, but there has been a push for a little bit more diversity lately. And I think that gives them hope. And then having a mentor who looks like them or is also from a marginalized background also helps kind of give that sense of like I can do it too, right? Or I can ask you straight up questions that perhaps I wouldn't feel comfortable asking in a different kind of environment.
It
Yeah.
sounds like there's like a couple different factors here. There's the finding community aspect. There's the, I guess, seeing role models aspect that but really benefits mentees. I'm curious, are you seeing any, or have you personally experienced any benefits for the mentor? That's a weird way I pronounce that, but for the mentor who is working with mentees, like what are they gaining from the experience beyond the stipend?
Hmm. I mean, I just really love mentorship. you know, I think it's so important. I think that when I started out writing, I didn't know what an MFA was. I didn't know, how to get published. I didn't know what an agent was. There's so much that was really opaque to me. And I did go to grad school, but grad school, or at least the one that I went to, was very much focused on craft, right? I think there's this kind of idea of like in grad school, the teachers don't want to sully the art by talking about the business, but then you're not really set up for success once you graduate and once you have a finished book. So I think that kind of having someone who is willing to break down, like, here's how you write a query letter, here's where you look for agents, like, here are some conferences to apply to, all of that can be so helpful. And I just get really excited when I read great work and I get to, help them or provide some sort of information that hopefully is helping to shape their art. So I love mentorships where I get to read some of the prose as well, and where I can kind of brainstorm with them and help them on that level, as well as more kind of practical mentorship. But for me, I think it's like it just like satisfies this like desire to be in community with others, right? And to give back. I don't know if that's the right term, but yeah. Mhm.
I agree. There's a certain joy when you can say like my mentee, got that agent that they wanted. They got the deal. For Las Musas, all of our mentors are volunteer. So it really is about that community and sharing the knowledge that you've hopefully learned through many years in publishing, and just essentially, yeah, giving back and building a bigger community as these authors and illustrators are also joining the business, as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm hearing some like parallels to like mutual aid as a concept, like lifting each other up, sharing what the resources that you have, the knowledge that you've gained through trial and error, and the mentor training that you've received in the past, to pass that along. Um, I'm curious about the programs you all have participated in, or just sort of your general perceptions of mentorship when it comes to what should a mentorship entail? What shouldn't it entail? And that could be, you know, writing advice, critique, industry advice. It should be craft focused, career oriented. There's a lot of different directions a mentorship could go. Do either of you have thoughts on that? Maybe we could start with Mia.
Okay. So as part of our application process, we are, and was a little trial and error throughout the years, where we do require our mentees to have a specific goal for their mentorship. And if you are not applying with a specific goal, I've noticed throughout the years that the mentorships are not as fruitful as they could be. So these goals are, they're anything between like improving our craft, polishing a manuscript for querying or agenting, or as you mentioned, like career advice, general craft work. Um, but definitely taking into consideration that, for example, with Las Musas, 6 months goes by very quickly. So having a clear, an achievable goal, I would say, would be one of the first things I would recommend in a mentorship. Also actually having a project, which seems odd thing to say. Was, of course you would have a project to work on in a mentorship, but a lot of people I've seen apply with like ideas and like wanting to essentially use their mentorship as a way to find an idea they want to work on. And that's, for at least for me, that doesn't feel like what a mentorship is. A mentorship, I sort of feel like, is you've done a lot of work already, and a mentorship is there to take you to a different level that you would not achieve on your own. So that's why I also would say, actually, I'll stop talking and I'll hand it over to Crystal. I'm sure it'll come up a little bit later.
This is just in the context of structured mentorships, right? Like these programs we're talking about, Julian?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I think that for me, what I see from my work as a mentor is that the mentorships should have kind of a mix of craft focus and career oriented mentoring, or at least that's the ones that I've been a part of, because there is something I think you can grow a lot as a mentee writer when you are working one-on-one with somebody in terms of craft, right? Because you're getting that really specialized feedback. I like to have my first meetings always be a conversation with the mentee about what is it that you hope to gain or learn, or what are your goals for these next 5-6 months. Are you working on something? Is it short stories? Is it a novel? How many pages? And should we work through together? And how should we break that up over the course of 5 months? So I do think it's really good to have that first meeting be something like a layout of the land. And then I also ask, what are your goals for the end of this, fellowship? What in terms of publishing? Is it to try to submit something, to gather up the courage to submit a short story? Is it to finish a novel and start querying? What is it that you want? So I do like to tailor it to the mentee. And then what are your kind of larger career goals? I ask all of this in the first semester or first meeting, so that throughout the next couple of months, we can make sure that we are answering those more career or publishing related questions, as well as looking at the actual art, the writing together.
Sounds like a mix of the career stuff, the craft stuff, and less so, starting a new thing and more so working on an existing thing or taking something to the finish line while you have this mentor sort of with you in the trenches of your drafts, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my next question is about who should be engaging in this stuff. So whether let's start with who should be looking to be mentored. At what point in their career do you feel like it's the right time? Crystal, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, I think, Mia, you were alluding to this, not I think if you are just in that like ideating stage and you don't have anything written, that might be too early because that's such a kind of nebulous area and it'll be hard for a mentor to really be able to help you, right? Because without something written, without a project, it's harder for the mentor to guide you. I think that when you are working on a book, a short story collection, a novel, a memoir, and you're in it, right? You know what you want the shape of it to be. You know what kind of writing career, at least short term, that you hope to have. You know, you have some idea of who you are as a writer. That I think is a great place to seek out mentors because then you yourself know what kind of questions to ask. You know what kind of results or like what kind of advice that you need to kind of push yourself to the next level. Does that make sense? Yeah,
So
that's
like
what I
you're
would
like,
say.
yeah, so you're like they're in a more self-aware place, I guess, in their journey. They're like kind of reflecting on what they've done so far and they kind of know where they want to be, but haven't quite gotten there.
Yeah, yeah. You're so good at summarizing and kind of like putting it all together.
I don't know what to attribute that to. I don't know, maybe grad school, but women's studies, a lot of listening.
Perfect.
Um,
Perfect.
so yeah, so maybe they're in this place where they know where they want to be. They're not there yet. Do they have to be published to
I
be
don't think so. No, I don't think so.
That's kind
No.
of what I figured, but I figured someone might ask. Um, Mia, you can respond to that too, but I'm also curious about since you've worked on the sort of working with other mentors side of things, like
Mhm.
when is someone ready to mentor? Feel free to answer both or either.
Sure. I would note that in terms of someone being ready to be a mentee, um, I have seen throughout the years that some of the applicants, for example, for the Musas mentorship program, equate a mentorship with a 101 course, which is
Mm,
not what it is. So we'll have some applicants who are like, I just wrote a picture book and I've never done it before and like don't know anything about picture books. And to that sort of applicant, I would say you need to take the time to research what a picture book is and look at children's book in general, and then have those conversations with yourself and like maybe with the critique group before you're ready for a mentorship. Or at least for me, I feel like a mentorship should not be a writing 101 or a uh, things that you should have looked up before coming here kind of
Mhm.
thing. And a lot of, I don't know if that's always very clear for people applying to a mentorship. Um, for our mentors, we do, we're kind of rude. We do require like them to have published before. Our mentees, you don't have to be published. In fact, it is a mentorship for unpublished writers. You can be agented, but you cannot be published because even when you are agented, there is still a long process before you're actually getting published. You might have an agent for many, many years and not sell a book during that time. So that mentorship can still be helpful during there. Um, uh, so for our mentors, they're all published writers. They're all identifying with they're Latinx, they're children's book writers, and they are willing to do the work of a mentor. We do sit down and chat with them. We do bi-monthly check-ins with our mentors and our mentees separately and have conversations. We do maintain that sense of community where a mentor perhaps may not have an answer to the question for a
mm,
mentee. They have all the other mentors that they can rely on and connect with and be able to provide that mentorship as well. Um, yeah, I don't know if I answered your question as to what makes a great mentor. I would also say that a good mentor understands the difference of I think a good mentor is allowing your mentee to find their own voice, and not trying to, change them and change their style, and essentially giving them or allowing them to have more confidence in themselves and see the value in their work. And I think those are the signs of a good mentor.
Mhm.
yeah. One of the I guess like pre-questions, I don't know what word I'm looking for there. One of the questions that came in when people were signing up for the session was about, do you have to be a published writer to be a mentor to another writer? What if you're an agent, or what if you're a publicist and just work in the industry? Have you heard of either of you heard of anyone in that kind of position being a mentor to a writer? Is that uncommon?
No, that's interesting. I know there are mentorships, I think, for, people who want to be agents, where they're paired with, I think, another agent. I haven't heard of those kind of crossing from agent to writer, although I suspect that would be helpful. But I've not heard of that myself.
Yeah, that could
Yeah,
be
I think
arrangement.
yeah. So I think Latinx and publishing does do that in terms of people who want to be agents and are matched with other agents. For Las Musas, you do have to be a published writer and you're mentoring within the age category that you are publishing in. We did experiment with having an editor be a mentor for a year. That since we are volunteer based, we are very dependent on whether or not people have time. So that editor only had time for that year. And it worked well. We did have to address the I guess the elephant in the room that just because they're being mentored by an editor doesn't mean they're going to be represented by that editor. So it
Mhm.
does, I think it does muddy things a little bit in terms of will this lead to representation afterwards? So
Yeah.
I don't know if that's,
Yeah.
I don't know if it's worth it or if it requires more understanding on both parties as to what the limits of the mentorship are.
Mhm.
Yeah, those boundaries sound useful, especially if there's like a possibility of the mentee getting their real hopes up really high about what will come next beyond the mentorship itself. Um, on a related note, let's talk about boundaries in terms of how long a mentorship lasts. How
Mhm.
long should a mentorship last, or do they typically last? How frequently are people meeting with their mentors within that period? And this can be specific to your own experiences or things you've witnessed in general in the broader lit community. Crystal, I'd love to hear from you about it.
Yeah. So with my work mentoring for AAWW and the Penn Emerging Mentors program, we would meet about once a month, and sometimes that was in person if the person lived near me, or it would be virtually, but it'd be once a month, and it would last about half a year. But I always leave that door open, right? And I don't, it's not like, okay, peace, we're done, never hear from you again. So those people I do say, like, keep in touch, tell me how your novel's going. If you have questions about, when you're at the stage where you're ready to query, let me know. So I always say, if I can be of help after the program ends, I'm here for you. It's not just a shut door, but the like structure of the fellowship will end in the 6 months. So I would say, like, I'm not going to be able to read per se like more pages after those 6 months, but I am here to answer questions, and if I can be of help, let me know.
Yeah, how about you?
Same. So during the 6 month mentorship, we do ask mentors to meet with their mentee once a month and really set and establish a goal, a mini goal within the mentorship to check in on in the following month. We do let them know if they want to continue communication after that 6 month period, they absolutely can. Many of them do. In the same way that Crystal mentioned, they're like, if they have any follow-up questions, and the door is always open to ask publishing or agenting questions. In terms of community, the mentees themselves have access to they have a community Discord, which they'll have access to in perpetuity. So that connection also is maintained and continued. We also hold yearly Zoom meetings with all of the mentees so that they can get to know each other and get to know the new group as they come in, and hopefully build those connections and those communities.
Got a couple kind of more logistical questions. Firstly, just where does one find these opportunities for formal mentorship? Or, if it's informal, how might someone approach a potential mentor?
Mm.
Crystal, do you want to?
Yeah, well, I think we've talked about the three, right? Las Musas, AAWW, Penn Emerging Mentors program. I know there's one called Paraplus. I haven't worked with them, but I know of them. Blue Stoop, and then should we talk about like the kind of more informal finding mentorship? No?
Sure.
For me, a lot of my mentorships have just kind of grown over time with former students who, I always say to students, I keep in touch, and a lot of them don't, but some of them do, right? And I love the ones that are proactive and will just send me an email saying, like, hi, it's been like this long, this is what I've been up to. And it creates this kind of actual bond, right? Where they, I have a student who every couple of months after she graduated, she would just kind of let me know how she was doing with her job and if she had made progress and what kind of books she was reading. And it just very organically became this mentorship over email. And I have other students who live in Brooklyn, which is where I live, and they will just reach out and say, can we like get coffee sometime? I just wanted to chat or like hear more about, I'm thinking about going to grad school and hear more about, like your thoughts. So I do appreciate with these kind of organic mentorships when the mentee takes the initiative, because I would love to mentor everyone, but I don't know who actually wants to be mentored, right? And also I'm just juggling a bunch of stuff on my calendar. But if they take the initiative and say like, can we get coffee sometime next month, that I'm happy to do so. And yeah, so it just kind of like organically grew over time through emails and meetups with former students.
So you're saying I shouldn't approach strangers and ask if they want to be mentored?
Hey, will you be my mentor?
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
never met you before, but I think that would be a harder ask, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I imagine it'd be a tough sell.
Yeah.
Yeah, if someone, obviously Las Musas is available, but if someone was like not doing kid lit or had a different life experience that wasn't aligned with the work that Las Musas does, where might you recommend they look for mentorship opportunities as a mentee?
Well, I would also recommend. I was at first I was going to say I didn't realize that you could. I don't think I ever categorized like giving people publishing advice as a mentorship, but because I was like, oh, I don't think I've mentored anyone outside of the Las Musas. But then I was like, oh, I do that all the time when people email
Yeah.
me and ask me publishing things. I was like, sure, I'll give you whatever information I have. Um,
Yeah, there's students that I've just like kept in touch with for years, and they'll just kind of come to me. And over time, it's become kind of this friendship, mentor, mentee relationship. And I think that's so nice when it's organic like that.
Mm.
that's awesome. So I would recommend, I will note that Las Musas also has a resource tab where it does mention a couple outside of Kidlit mentorships. I'm not sure how well they're updated, but I also think Authors Guild might have some resources for available mentorships, as well as Latinx in publishing. And I feel like most literary organizations do tend to have those resources for the official mentorships that you could look into. And also writing programs like, for example, the New School might have that information as well. So a lot of that would hopefully be available. And in terms of unstructured mentorships, which I apparently now have done, I was like, I'm very excited. I have that information. You never don't not be afraid to reach out to that favorite author or illustrator. We've had a
Yeah.
couple of years in Las Musas where one of our mentees was already connected with a mentor, and they just sort of naturally continued that mentorship through Las Musas as well. And it was, I think they met at a conference, a writers conference, and started their official mentorship through that in particular. So you never know where you can find people to connect to.
Yeah.
There's some social skills involved here, like
Yes.
approaching someone you don't know, an author you admire. I guess Crystal, as a writer, what would work for you? If hypothetically, if someone was like looking to work with a novelist or with you specifically, like what would that outreach look like? That wouldn't be creepy or offensive,
Yeah.
you know?
Um, so a lot of my organic mentorships have been born of students who I've worked with before, like in a workshop setting, whether that is in undergrad or graduate school, or just, something like a workshop at Catapult, where I think vibes are important, right? Vibes and the fact that they connect with my feedback is important, right? Or my views on, I don't know, like the literary world. So I think it makes sense that a lot of my mentorships have kind of come from students that I've worked with before whose writing that I have become familiar with. And again, like this onus of them reaching out and keeping in touch with me, I think is really helpful. Keep sending updates. I know it kind of sounds awkward, but I love when my students just send me a little update like once every few months and say like, hi, like I graduated, now I'm working at Google. Like for some reason, I have a lot of students who are actually computer engineers but want to write. I don't know why. And they're like, I'm working at Google, but I have no time to write. And now I'm thinking about grad school. And here are some books that I've been reading. And I love that. So that is really sweet because then I get to know them beyond the classroom, right? I get to know that they're still like thinking about writing after they've finished the program. But I will say, there was one person that I'd never been in a classroom environment with, and she reached out to me because she reached out to me after my first book was published because she was Korean American and really connected to some of the themes in my book. And she said, I don't want this to be like awkward, but I would love to like take you out to coffee and just chat with you. And I said, okay, sure. And we met, and she was so sweet. She had written all these questions because she was worried that the conversation would be awkward. But we just had a very good connection, and she was an aspiring writer, and she was starting her graduate program, and she was nervous because she had just moved to New York, and she would just take the initiative to kind of ask like, hey, can we meet up for coffee or keep in touch. And so I do think it does require a little bit of like emotional or social finesse, right? And knowing not to overstep boundaries and to be, I guess, polite, but also to take that initiative. Yeah, I feel like it's like a little, I don't know, there's not one way to do it, I guess, right?
Yeah, there's no one size fits all solution.
Yeah.
But it sounds like having either a pre-established connection through maybe taking a class with an author you admire could help, or reaching
Yeah.
out in like a thoughtful way where you're really thinking about why this person is a good fit for what you're
Yes.
working
And I think it's also important to know that a mentorship, don't go into a mentorship because you think like this person's going to help me get an agent or this one person's going to help me get published, because we can't do that. Like there's just we don't have any power to or guarantee, And I think that if you're going in with that kind of intention, that will be kind of clear, and it will not feel good to the mentor, because then you feel like you're being used. Yeah. And we have no control over like we can't get you an agent, we can't get you published. That's not, within our control.
Yeah, I mean, publishing is so gatekept as an industry. I think it may be tempting to perceive anyone who's having some modicum of success as like the holder of the keys now, um, when maybe in actuality they're just kind of one rung up on the gate.
Right.
Yeah. So another sort of logistical question is financial. We've heard a little bit that there are sometimes stipends for mentors. We haven't really talked about what participants, what mentees, should there be a cost associated with being mentored? Is that something that should be expected to be free, or is there maybe something in the middle that I'm not thinking of? Mia, I'd love to hear from you since because of your work with Las Musas.
So for Musas, both mentors and mentees are volunteer based. So we don't have any formal charging or anything like that. I don't think it's even come up, so I'd be interested to hearing if there is actually a cost for other people applying to mentorship programs. The only thing that we stress when applying to Las Musas is that to make sure that you are aware you're applying to a 6-month mentorship, and we expect you to work on this mentorship for 6 months, and that you are aware and able to dedicate the time that you need for this work, for this mentorship. Of course, things happen and that will come up. But being conscious of the time that your mentor is volunteering, and that you have to match the energy for those 6 months as well.
The time commitment, but not a financial commitment.
Yes.
Yeah. I think for AWW and Pan America, the mentees don't pay anything, right? It's just the organization will give an honorarium to the mentor. And then for, these more organic mentorships that I've had, they never pay me. That would be weird, I think. That would be strange. So no, I've gotten paid from the organization, and they don't take the money from the mentees. And then I have never gotten paid for, an organic mentorship. And I think like these organic mentorships, they don't start out with the student saying like, can you be my mentor? It just kind of happens over time because we've kept in touch, and because they've built a relationship out of like trust and our shared, love for language and literature. And again, it's like this emphasis on organic rather than something more formal.
So if it's like an unstructured mentorship and if someone is asking you for money, maybe that's a red flag a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that'd be so weird, right?
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
And then in terms of like stipends for mentors in a more formal situation, what's the range look like? Do either of you have any sense? Obviously, there's volunteers, but what's the mid to high range?
I've only been paid from AWW in Pan America, but it was 1,000 for one of them and 1,500 for the other one. So that's all I've been paid. Yeah.
Cool. So I want to move on to talking a little bit about something Mia mentioned earlier about what it takes to be an effective mentor. And then I'll also add to that what it takes to be an effective mentee. Do either of you have thoughts on that you want to jump in with?
Do you want to go first? I'm thinking.
Let's see. So I think I mentioned earlier to be an effective mentor. Obviously for us, you do have to be in the business, of course, because we do require a lot of that insight. Being able to push a mentee to grow in their craft and grow in their goals, while not I sort of keep coming down to like you don't want to be leading the witness. You want them to be going along their own path and helping them um, along, figuring out that they have what they need to go along that path. Um, Whether it is providing craft resources or helping them along in their project. I think a good mentor helps their mentee achieve, um, understand that they have what they need to be in the business, to be a writer, to be an illustrator. I always want to make sure at the end of our mentorships that my mentees they love that the work that they've created, they are confident in it, they understand that publishing does not determine value in their work, and that they are happy and proud with themselves, regardless of whether or not they're going to immediately get an agent or immediately get a publishing deal. Because a lot of being a published author illustrator is perseverance and understanding that your work is valuable. And publishing has no say in that because they got their own thing going on. Um, and for a mentee, some things that I would recommend is that you have been in a critique group before. If you've never had your work critiqued and are entering a mentorship, that can be very jarring to have someone pick apart your work and really push you. So having that experience, I think, is invaluable. And having knowledge within, for example, um, actually, I think it can be applied to genre work as well, like being knowledgeable of the craft that you're working with. If you're working in picture books, if you're working in children's illustrations, you should hopefully have some knowledge in the world that you are stepping into. And hopefully a love for the world that you're stepping into. It's nothing worse than reading a children's book by someone who looks down on children.
Yeah, I can't imagine.
There have been a couple where I'm like, do you like kids? You probably shouldn't be writing for them.
That's funny.
Yeah. Hearing about the genre seems important for sure. Crystal, it sounded like we were gonna chime in.
Yeah, I was going to say, I agree with what Mia was saying about, for a mentor, I think it's important that you have kind of like an expansive view, right? You don't want to make the mentee or shape the mentee into like what you think the mentee's writing should be or what you think the mentee's path should be. It does require somebody with a more open perspective, somebody who is willing to kind of ask in the beginning, like, what is it that you want to get out of this mentorship? What is it that you want your book to be like, and how can I best help you? So I think sometimes writers can have like this editor's eye where they think like I have the answer of how to make this better, but it's actually veering away from what the writer actually wants. So it's somebody who's able to kind of identify whether or not they can do that, like put themselves in the mentee's perspective. I think that's really important. And I think what Mia was saying about mentee having some experience in getting that feedback, right? Having some experience and having knowledge of who the mentor is, like what they, like what they've written, what their writing explores, what themes that the writer is interested in, because ideally you're finding a mentor who has similar values as you, whose writing style you also connect with. Because say in the field of literary fiction, there's so many different styles. And if you ask someone to be your mentor and they have a totally different kind of aesthetic than you, that's going to be just kind of confusing sometimes. Or if you ask someone to be your mentor because they seem really fancy but you've never read their work, that's not a great like foundation for a relationship, right?
Yeah, that last point, I was going to ask that. It's more, sounds like it's much more important that you're aligned like in your values and your style than it is to have someone with the biggest name attached to your
Yeah.
mentorship.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to save these last few minutes before the Q&A to talk about informal mentorship a little bit more. What could an informal mentorship look like? I mean, to me, it could be a lot of things. It could be, just approaching an author you're interested in, like I think Mia was mentioning earlier. Maybe it could be a peer mentorship. How can we think outside the box about mentorship? Mia, do you want to go first?
Sure. I do like I'm happy that you mentioned peer mentorship because I do think once you start building that community, that also naturally happens between authors who have multiple books published and author illustrators who are starting out in the business or in the process. And that knowledge share is very invaluable, particularly when you are talking about hopefully having long careers and having sustainable um, uh, careers themselves.
Mhm.
In terms of, actually, I'll think a little bit more. I'll throw it to Crystal over to Crystal, if you don't mind, while I think about it just a bit.
Yeah, I love this idea of peer mentorships. I feel like that's just like another word or term for like a community that you're building as a writer, right? If you find a community of author illustrators or a memoir community or, nonfiction, fiction, whatever it is, poetry, prose, and you find a community where you are willing to share resources, and say like, oh, hey, this like conference just like opened up their applications. I went last year. You guys should all apply or whatever it is. It's like that open sharing of information. I think that is really helpful. And I think that's what a peer mentorship can really look like. And I think those sometimes feel even better because you're all on the same path, and you kind of like are all in it together. For example, when my first book, the year before my first book was coming out, I was in an email group with a bunch of other debut writers. And we had this like big email group where we would just say like, I just got my cover and I don't like it. What do I do? Or my publicist left. What do I do? Or, I don't, it was just, it was wonderful because we were all inexperienced together. And so we could all kind of commiserate about the process, but also somebody might have a different perspective or a contact or something that could help. So I think that kind of peer mentorship is also really important. Yeah.
I'll know that that's actually how Las Musas started, and I don't think I ever
Oh.
considered it as a mentorship group, but we essentially started as a group of authors who were not getting marketing support from our publishers and sort of banded together and said like, okay, I have to do this blog. Can someone like amplify this? Or like, what are your thoughts on this? Like I'm being offered this for my second book. Should I have a conversation with my agent? So I'm glad you brought that up because I don't think that would have ever registered as a mentorship, as a group mentorship for me.
It's nice to be able to think about it in a more expansive way. I definitely want to get to the Q&A, but I'll just say one more thing, which is that I feel like if you are not finding the writing community you want, you should make it. And you don't have to be an expert. You don't have to be published. You don't have to be famous or rich or any of those things. You just have to pick a time in a day, pretty much, and then
Mhm.
extend the invite. And something will form. I formed a writing group 6 years ago that is carrying on strong every Saturday just because I knew that I wouldn't write if I didn't ask people to join me for it. And it's been going on for a long time. It's really stable. I have a broad community and people within that community who form smaller communities. You just have to take the first step.
Mhm.
So with that, I'd love to open it up for the Q&A. Johnny, can you help us deal with these 26 questions?
Yeah, absolutely. You've answered a lot of the ones that are
Okay,
sitting
great.
there unanswered. Don't worry. Someone mentioned she mentions first-time writers that often come to her via a presentation at a library. I think that's taking that first step. It can be lots of different events where you make those connections. Now,
Yeah.
we got a few questions that I think are about asking if the relationship is editorial. If someone wants manuscript feedback, is a
Hmm.
mentorship the best fit for that, or compared to like beta readers or just hiring a developmental editor, how might how might a writer make that decision of what kind of path to take?
Yeah, I mean, I also do provide editorial manuscript consultations, right? And that is like a paid thing where if somebody wants feedback on a whole novel and they want like full, thorough edits. And it sometimes is former students who say, like, hey, I really liked your feedback. I feel like you understand what I'm trying to do with this book. Um, can I do this editorial consultation? And sometimes it's easier if all you want is feedback on a one project, because then I can just take the time and fully read through your work, and I can be as honest as possible. I don't know about it's a harder lift, I think, in a just like a mentorship situation, to ask somebody, hey, will you read my work? That's all I really want from you. That, because there's no kind of relationship then, right?
I agree. I feel like that there's so many, as you mentioned earlier, so many levels and interconnections in a mentorship that if all you want is editorial feedback, then you're either just getting it from a freelance editor or forming that critique group um, yourself. But it's not, doesn't sound like you actually just want a mentorship, which brings much more into it.
Yeah.
Someone asks, what do you do when you feel a disconnect or even disrespect from a mentee? Someone asked, what's most difficult about working with a mentee? I
Hmm.
feel like there needs to be a plan in place, I assume. A mentor, a potential mentor, might fear the mentee gets too attached. I know we discussed boundaries a bit, but is it like what guardrails should be in place in case things just don't go well?
It's interesting. I've never had it that
Yeah,
experience. Um, I've never had an experience where I felt a disconnect or a disrespect, because then why does the mentee want to be in a relationship with me, or like receive my feedback? I don't know. I
yeah.
think if that were to happen and it was within the structure of an organization, I would reach out to the organization and say, like, I don't know if this is the best fit. Maybe this mentee could work with someone else, right? And then I feel like I find it would be hard for that to happen in a more organic environment, because why would that mentee be reaching out if they don't respect me as a writer? I know, that's an interesting question.
Well, it's good to disaster plan.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I think in a lot of scenarios you would be going to someone at the like organization, and that person is probably not that well equipped to deal with the situation, and you just need to draw a hard line. Um,
Yeah.
I know none of y'all are really nonfiction people, but do you? Some people are wondering, because it sounds like we're talking about fiction a lot, if the mentee mentor experience is as popular, as beneficial in nonfiction writing.
Oh, I think so. I think AWW, Pen America, Paraplus, Blue Soup, probably. Like, I think they also have nonfiction mentorships as well. I just keep talking about it in terms of fiction because I'm a fiction writer, but I don't think it's just to that genre.
We also have nonfiction in Las Musas. It's just based by age category, so nonfiction, young adult, nonfiction, picture book, and so on. So
Mhm.
you would be, I think, mentorship is useful for any genre and age category, and it's really about what you make of that mentorship and the effort you put into it, and hopefully, as mentioned, that you have a mentor that you connect with and are in that journey together.
Mhm.
Now about payment and finding a mentorship program, I don't want to insert my opinion too much, but I did some research because of this. So a lot of the mentorships out there are not directly paid, but it's available to members of an organization. So you might want to look into like a regional thing, or, like Nevada historical fiction writers, like that level of specificity. And sometimes those types of organizations, put together a mentorship program. So maybe you have to pay $30 or $80 a year membership, but then you're eligible for things like that. I've also noticed that, some people, I'm talking too much. Some people ask, will the Authors Guild offer a mentorship program? That would be very complicated. We would love to, but we also don't want to like judge anyone. We don't want to like determine who's qualified to be a mentor or mentee. So that's one hurdle. But I've also noticed that there's been some organizations that start from scratch specifically for this purpose, and then they kind of disappear, go out of business after a few years. And I don't know why that is. I think it's just hard to sustain without a
It's
central
sustainability.
force.
It's a lot of moving parts in the back end. And just to mention, as one of those people who had to reassess and like move mentor and mentees around when they were not compatible, it's just a lot of emotional work, which may not seem like something that you would have to do, but it is a lot about sustainability, and most of the people putting these together are creatives themselves. So it's extra work that they're doing on top of their own creative work, and their own probably full-time jobs that actually pay them.
Someone asks for tips for introverts. And on that note, someone asked what kinds of questions might be prepped. Crystal, you mentioned someone writing down her questions. Well, how does it get started? You talk about your favorite books. Like what are some specific topics that would be good icebreakers?
I think for extreme introverts, like I think the wonderful thing is that we have email, and hopefully that's a little less intimidating. So you can reach out to that, writer that you worked with in workshop, or a writer whose reading you attended and you like got up the courage to introduce yourself, or whatever it is. I think through email that makes it a little less scary, and see, how they respond. And I think the kind of questions, I think it's nice for the mentor to feel like this person is not just here to ask me a bunch of stuff, like ask for things, right? And so it's nice when it's an actual conversation of like, how did you get started in this, as well as the mentee explaining like where they are in the process, but kind of genuinely having an interest in the other person, in the mentor as a person, so it doesn't feel transactional, I think is important.
There's some parallels between those guides they put together for people who are attempting to network. It's not exactly the same, but like share a little bit about yourself, ask about the other person. Don't make it too transactional.
Yeah. And to kind of really know why you're reaching out to this person. Is it because they wrote an essay that you really connected with? Can you like tell them that? Is it because of a shared background? Like, what is it that makes you want to get to know this mentor more?
That's wonderful. Well, the hour is up. This has been great. I will collect some of the specific resources and share some links with the audience in a follow-up email tomorrow or the next day. But Julian, gentlemen, co-director of Stoop, authors Crystal, Hana Kim, and Mia Garcia and Garcia Pena, thank you so much for being here. I think everyone's feeling really comfortable with this process now. I really appreciate your wisdom.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Thanks.
So great to chat with you all.